The NWSL is back from its June break, and I have a couple of burning questions that I don't know if I know the answer to, but we are going to talk it through anyway. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of The Late Sub presented by Ally Bank. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Wednesday, July 1st. And we have not gotten to see a lot from the NWSL over the last month, but maybe jumping off of this weekend's Challenge Cup, which was a blast. Thanks for everyone who joined us in Columbus, talking a little bit about what we think is going to happen in the second half of the year, questions that we have where teams begin to rise and fall, momentum shifts, mid-season signings, and what we're hoping for in this sort of parity-rich season that we're seeing in the 2026 NWSL season. Let's dig in. So after the NWSL's long June off, it is back. We're going to be getting some domestic women's soccer back in the States, and I cannot wait. I missed the NWSL. Missed it very, very much. Didn't know what to do with my weekends, watching a lot of Men's World Cup, but it just isn't quite the same. So going into this, I think the best way, we're not going to do any huge previewing. We're not going to hit every single team, but I think that going into the quasi-second half of the season here, I just wanted to hit on some big picture questions that I have, some of which are kind of bred out of some of the changes that teams made in mid-season. Some of it comes just from where we left off and wondering now that sort of the haze of competition has passed and we're starting anew. What are these teams kind of looking like? Really does feel like a season reset in many ways, where maybe some momentum is lost, momentum is gained. I think these teams are going to benefit from how much training they have. I can certainly tell you from being on the ground at the Challenge Cup this past weekend that they are eager to get back into it. These teams are ready to go. So we're just going to hit on 5 big questions that I have. Like I said, this is non-exhaustive. We're not hitting every single team, but just in terms of some of the themes of the season, here are some of the questions that I would like to get answered as we see games come back. And I think the big one, we talked about this last week, talk about it this week. We're probably going to be talking about it a lot for the rest of the year. Sam Kerr to Gotham. Is this the piece that launches Gotham to a repeat title? Now, going into the NWSL season, I did not think that Gotham was going to repeat. I thought that they had, these stronger elements of what they were able to do in last postseason. We weren't necessarily seeing those pieces come back together in the regular season this year just yet. But the Bats did announce their big signing of the midseason this week. It's official. Sam Kerr joining the team on a nice long contract through 2030. I don't have any inside info, but if I had to guess, the length of that contract probably indicates that there are incentives in building salary throughout, which kind of allows you to make this huge midseason signing while you still also have other players under contract. And then you restructure probably your entire, roster under the cap going forward with this rising salary for Kerr. That's my guess. That's how I think NWSL teams are going to be doing this for big players in the future, especially when they bring them in at the end of the European season. And she joins Gotham, as I mentioned, on the heels of another domestic cup win for the club after they defeated Kansas City 2-0 in Columbus last Friday to win the 2026 Challenge Cup. Shout out to the Challenge Cup. If anyone went to our event on Thursday, we had a blast. Great atmosphere. Really enjoyed it. Columbus is very ready for their NWSL team. But I also found that to be a pretty illuminating victory for Gotham, at least for me seeing it in person, against a team as good as Kansas City and as dangerous specifically as Kansas City in the attack. Now, I don't know, just based on their tendencies, if Kerr joining Gotham launches them into the Shield conversation. You would think yes, based on every foundation that they've built, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But as we know, that style of play has not always really been their MO in the Juan Carlos Amoros era. It's not about running over the competition so much as it's about building towards the postseason, getting that dynasty. I know they want the Shield. I'm not saying that they don't, but I think they would rather feel like they're building towards something as they get closer to October than worrying too much again about building those results at the beginning of the year, especially once they were going through CONCACAF competition. Having that behind them now will certainly also be helpful. We saw that last year where they go through CONCACAF W Champions Cup. That goes great for them last year. Didn't go so well this year, but that puts a strain on your roster, puts a strain on your whole team. Having that behind them allows them to focus on NWSL a little bit more as they manage that busy match calendar. Winning breeds more programming, as we've seen in the women's game, but also in football at large. But once again, Challenge Cup, one data point, but they're poised in a knockout game this past weekend, at least a domestic one, really shined. Once they got into that playoff mentality, what you can see for them is always just they have no problem probing for mistakes for the other team, holding off chances, putting their opponents in really uncomfortable game states during games. I've talked about their defense before. If you look at the numbers, what their defense is doing this season is exceptional, best in the league. But getting to see it kind of, again, put this vice grip on Kansas City's attack was really, really interesting this past weekend. And despite their injuries, this has been a thin defense for Gotham. They have had injuries to Bruninha. She has not been available for them so much. They send Lily Reel off to Boston a few weeks ago. But they still look so incredibly sound. They have so much veteran leadership back there. They're very cool, calm, collected. And I do think if you look at these JCA teams, they know what they're supposed to do in the defense. The way that they rotate, the way they have their kind of pinpoint movements to, again, disrupt what the other team is doing to put this vice grip on them in possession. I have yet to see a Gotham team have a lot of trouble kind of doing that. That instruction must be incredibly clear and very attuned to these types of players. What we saw last Friday, more specifically, is that they got Emily Sonnet back in the starting lineup, which allowed them to rest Midge Purse, who had been putting in some good shifts at outside back by necessity in favor of pushing Jess Carter out wide again, opposite Guro Raiton. And then you had Sonnet and Tierna Davidson at center back, and they were all really, really good. It is that hinge style that they have Carter sitting back a little bit more. At this point, Carter for them, and I think this is perfect again as she continues to get older, is she's, yes, an outside back option, but she's not their like run outside back option. She is as much in a 3-back as she is in a 4-back, because they like to shift right and forward to push into the midfield as often as possible. And they're so good at squeezing possession into their opponent's defensive half. For as much as we kind of rag on Gotham for not being huge goal scorers, it's not for lack of tilting the field. When they are in possession, that is a high defensive line. And it is a very attacking, again, defensive shift where they're basically adding an additional midfielder and allowing the team to run through more like a 3-back. Now, that doesn't always work, as we know. And sometimes it doesn't always feel like they are as attuned, as almost too defensive at times with their defensive midfield structure. They get a lot of width, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily turn into attacking chances. But I do think, one of the best players that I saw in that game, they didn't actually ask for a Challenge Cup MVP, which I thought was interesting. I guess I didn't notice that we don't do that anymore. But I really think Raiton, who is not a defender, and she'd be the first person to say it, it's been an incredible pickup for them. And them being able to plug her in at that outside back role unlocks a lot of things, including, I think, the ability to do that transaction to move Reel out, possibly to bring Kerr in. I thought Kansas City could have done more trying to get back in behind. Obviously, that high line from Gotham with Temwa Chawinga available, she's usually that line breaker. It just didn't happen for them in that particular game. But I also just seeing what Raiton's able to do playing out of position. She looks seamless in her positioning, and Gotham's style, that style of pushing her more forward up into the midfield, allows her to send like those beautiful crosses in. She's so good on the ball. You might have noticed that it was her recycled ball that led to the Labonta tackle that earned Gotham that opening penalty kick on Friday. She does a lot for them in that tweener role that they love. That's the star role for Gotham as much as anything. There's a reason why like 2 players have gotten Rookie of the Year playing over there, playing that sort of hinge left back or playing hinge outside back. I think that is sometimes their star player, and I think slotting Raiton in there, even though she herself is not a natural defender, was a very astute move, and she's been a champion about it, and I think you're starting to see the dividends of that. Now, I know they obviously would love to go into a more normal structure, I think, with their outside backs that they actually have available, maybe move Raiton into the midfield full time, but I'm less concerned, I think, about their defensive absences than I was before, seeing the way that they handled that against Kansas City. So none of that is about Kerr directly, but it does at least back up this optimism that you've got all of that, and then you've got Rose Lavelle, and you've got Astaire, and you plop Sam Kerr into that mix, that foundation, that could open up something really special on top of what Gotham already has. Will it be that easy? Again, results have shown in the past, not necessarily. There might be still a learning curve in terms of just positioning and getting people where they need to be. Still very curious who has to sit in favor of Kerr, whether she's going to be in tandem with Astaire. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week, right? Maybe there's less time for Rookie of the Year frontrunner, in my opinion, Jordan Dudley, who had another exceptional game in the Challenge Cup. She built her own shot and finished it to get the second goal. She's really good at playing JCA's style. She loves to develop turnovers in the from an attacking position. She loves full team defense. She creates her shots and she finishes them. Is this an avenue out for Purse to be doing different things? And I think it just depends on what that mix looks like and what exactly that dynamic does to an attack. That can make things sputter at times before it really gets going. But I also think that the Challenge Cup was a great showing for Gotham overall and a healthy reminder of why we can't ever ignore them as a championship threat. Like I said, I didn't set them to repeat. Repeating's really hard, but I do believe in this group. I think that there's so much veteran knowledge. I think that Kerr still has so much to give. I think she's a very natural NWSL style player who's going to not miss a beat jumping back in once she kind of gets going with her teammates. And so it's just about, I think, personality, talent management, and making the whole thing go. So I would love to see it. I mean, I think that I would love for Gotham to be Shield winners. I said that at the beginning of the season. And I also do just think if they stay as healthy as they possibly can, even if they are just as healthy as they were last weekend, that is not a team I would want to see in the postseason for sure. So lots of questions about Gotham, but hopefully positive ones. I mean, Gotham is a really, really interesting team in that way. They've got really big positives, some negatives. You always want them to do more and get deeper and turn into something really, really, sort of historic, but we've yet to see it other than obviously what we've seen in the postseason. So excited to see how that project works out. Moving on next to my next big question, which is a little bit further down the playoff line, a little bit less ambitious, but very ambitious in its own way, which is that the other big addition that we're seeing, and this one is not new, but it is one that we've been waiting for a while, is can Lindsey Heaps, as she returns to the NWSL, nudge Denver above the playoff line? Got that big name coming in. They've been waiting for that marquee U.S. Women's National Team signing all season. They're finally going to get the U.S. captain in market, right? And the Summit are already doing all right. They're only 2 points outside the playoff line with a little over half the season to go, as we know. And they've been continuing to grow into their sense of their team-wide identity week after week. And that has turned into results over time. I mean, you can just see it in the standings, right? 3 of Denver's last 4 wins, or just 4 wins total, actually, 3 of their 4 total wins this season came in their last 4 matches before the summer break. And their goal differential is actually better than 2 playoff position teams right now. They're a little bit healthier in terms of their goals created and their goals conceded. They're not so much of a sieve defensively. There's a lot to like there. But I also think bringing Heaps in as your marquee signing, while there are a million obvious reasons off the pitch that this is a home run, is a really interesting experiment in positional football, where a box-to-box leader in this way can impact all parts of the game for them, but she's not going to be your obvious goal scorer or your obvious disruptive defender, which leads us to this week's segment, Ally Outstanding Asset. As always, this segment is brought to you by our partner, Ally Bank. Ally is dedicated to making it easier to be a women's sports fan, starting with providing the tools you need to spend and save. Ally Bank, member FDIC. So Heaps, as a foundational member of this first season of Denver's existence, is, it makes a ton of sense, like I said, off the pitch and on. You just look at sort of what this means for a grounding identity for the team, right? Well-known captain of the U.S. Women's National Team, a Denver native. She's won pretty much everything there is to win at the club level in both the NWSL and in Europe. And her veteran experience is going to be a key to just sort of the progress of the team going forward beyond just sort of some of the X's and O's on the pitch. But utilizing her as the team's on the pitch outstanding asset as they try to make this playoff push is really interesting from both a role and personal strength perspective, in my opinion. She's not known so much anymore as like an out-and-out goal scorer. She was pushing into the attack a little bit more. She won MVP in 2018 for Portland, but that was a different player back then. It was just she played a little bit differently. She was a little bit more attacking. She was allowed to really run forward, crash the box, that sort of thing. And I know any team would still be happy to have her on set pieces in particular, but like I said, her playing style has shifted quite a bit from that player who won MVP in 2018. She's more of a tempo setter now, more of an on-ball progressor, someone who can certainly rock with more physical playing style, but she impacts games way more when she's got a little bit of time to also influence play. I think some of that does come from playing in France for so long. She'll certainly feast on the mid block or the low block. I think any team that gives her time is going to really regret it. But a number of NWSL teams' high pressing styles that we know that they have could also give her some trouble as she readjusts to sort of the league's defensive intensity. I think that's a player that you're going to want to push. You're going to want to contest every single time. But also at the same time, the NWSL is way less transitional than the way that she left it when she did go to Europe for that second stint. So it's just all very interesting to see. You pull that player out of the NWSL, she gets this different experience, you put her back in the NWSL, and you just sort of see how she takes to it this second time. But as a midfield leader, she is going to have impact on all different sides of the ball, influencing positive play while not necessarily being asked to be the one scoring goals or the one making last-ditch tackles. It's watching a player have the ability to sort of, pull the strings so much as they are going to be that impact player on either side. And I also think the dream for them is fairly obvious, that she will be an incredible long-term asset as a locker room leader. But I'm so eager to find out what impact she has on the team right now. I think it could be quiet. I think it could be, again, more sort of in this in between the lines sort of thing. I think she's going to be good at breaking defenses down, but I also think that I can imagine the way that other teams are going to want to play her. So it's just really interesting to see a team take a midfield presence like this and have that be the marquee signing in their first year. And Heaps will certainly care about bringing wins to Denver fans, just like Ally Bank cares about keeping fans close to the game they love. Ally Bank, member FDIC. Being a women's sports fan can add up quickly. From tickets, your game day fit, tailgating, getting to the game, Ally Bank gets that. Ally is dedicated to making it easier to be a women's sports fan. With Ally's accounts, you save automatically while you spend. That way, you don't have to miss the next big rivalry game and can focus on what matters to you. Learn more at ally.com. Ally Bank, member FDIC. So Denver, I'm hopeful on. I think that they could really make a really interesting playoff push, and I can't wait to see what Heaps' place in that is. But let's talk about a team that is already doing great. They are cruising on their way to a playoff position. And the question now is Utah's dream run sustainable? Are we looking at a Shield contender? Are we looking at a championship contender? Are we looking at a surprise that maybe fades a little bit down the stretch, but still is a very dangerous team going into the postseason? I'll put myself out there and say that early on into their run to second in the standings going into the break, I thought that Utah were benefiting a little bit from some strength of schedule wins. It is still true, I must say, that Utah has yet to register a win against any of the teams that are currently sitting above the playoff line so far this season. Not really their fault. They haven't played many of them. It's sort of an interesting balance. And I think you can look at that and say, okay, but those teams aren't above the playoff line because they've had to play Utah. That could also be true. There's some cause and effect there. But if you look at these other contenders, right? They lost to Kansas City and San Diego, and they earned draws, good draws, against Washington and Portland. Not the worst indictment, but you do keep wondering sort of what the staying power is here when they play some more teams with these different looks for a team wildly outperforming their recent season results, as we know. And there's no denying the early longevity of that success. They're unbeaten in 10 straight games coming back from the break. And I do think there is that stability of what they're showing and a sturdiness to the roster that will at least see them to the playoffs. And I would like to think get them a very good seed. They play a punishing style of defense. They like to hold the ball as much as they can, but also they can hurt you on the counterattack. They let their offense dictate the game state to give their increasingly sturdy defense some room to breathe. This is all sustainable. I think that they're playing... It's physically punishing, but it's smart. And I think you can do both. And I think due to that, they indicated that this summer break puts them in a good position to feel fresh enough, both mentally and physically, to keep that central ethos to the team together. I think without a break, that could be really hard. I think it's very easy to fade down the stretch in sort of the dog days of summer. We see fewer goals get scored in the second half of the NWSL season. We see defenses tighten up. A lot of that has to do with these teams getting to know each other well, but also just the realities of deep summer in the United States. But also at the same time, maybe if there's any team that might kind of be unfortunate or feel unfortunate about this break, it would be Utah, perhaps. There are no more surprises now. Every team has gotten a chance to get film on you, and there's no catching any teams off guard. They're not going to get, run over by your style. They know your style. They've, many of these teams have already played you once before. Some of these better teams have gotten a lot of time to get a lot of scouting on what you're able to do. And again, that commitment necessarily to run over teams with those waves of attack is something that can break down. Now, I fully expect the Royals to keep proving people wrong. I also just don't think there's one infallible team in the NWSL this year, which allows these teams that are continuing to get better and continuing to progress to break through. That's nice. And that is very common in an expansion year. In a non-expansion year, you're more likely to see, I think, talent consolidation near the top. I think now with teams figuring out new salary structures, there's the hip rule, there's all of that. Now that we've got this additional expansion, you're going to see that parity really come through again, and that allows this story for a team like Utah. And I really do think they're going to end this season. It's going to be the most successful season in club history. I don't know if I'm penciling them in as Shield winners just yet. It takes experience, I think, at the top to be able to pull that off, but maybe. We've seen teams like, San Diego broke through in 23. Like, we have seen some new people on top of that list. But I do think they're going to be a playoff team. I think they're going to be a dangerous playoff team. And I think that we should be seriously talking about them as a postseason contender, because if they're able to string these runs together, that can turn into something. That experience begets experience. And so I'd worry a little bit about the tape, but also I think what they're doing is sustainable enough to see them through. Next one, we're getting a little bit more individual. And this is a question, another nebulous question, and I think we'll find the answers soon, is can anyone catch up to Barbara Banda in the MVP race? As of right now, in my opinion, all other opinions open and welcome, but MVP is Barbara Banda's to lose. She impacts Orlando. It feels like more than any other player individually impacts their team. The Pride are keeping afloat nicely in this playoff race, but they are having to rely on goal scoring a little bit more. Their defense is a little bit shakier than it's been in past years. She's been the best overall player, in my opinion, in the league thus far. She's running away with it at this moment. But is there anyone that can catch up? Can we make this a little bit of a competition? Who's going to be making that late season surge, as we know some players love to do? And will it be these same players that we've been shouting out all season? Or will some new names get into the fold? By nature of what we do see every year, I do ultimately think MVP tends to award some late season bias. So now is the time for players to come on strong. And there isn't another international break until October, except notably for African players who have qualified for the Women's African Cup of Nations. Those perennial contenders for NWSL MVP, as we know, from African nations, obviously include Banda and two-time winner Temwa Chawinga, both of whom, well, I've seen some news about this trickle out for sure, but like very, very likely will be away from their clubs for a few weeks starting at the end of July due to the last-minute rescheduling of WAFCON. Now, being away for a while for a big international tournament hasn't always hurt MVP chances in the past. We know this from World Cups where the NWSL took a little bit less of a break than they do now, Olympics, that sort of thing. But in an already choppy schedule in 2026, where they've already had this big long break, we're having players come back and then those African players step out. Now, also, I just want to shout out WAFCON. Please watch. It's going to be really, really incredible, really cool. You do have to wonder if time without Banda and Chawinga in the league hurts their chances, or will it perhaps actually even more underline their importance to both their teams and the league at large? And then once you do kind of get through some of these other usual suspects that we've mentioned on the show before, right? Like Corey Bethune's been playing very well in these later stages for Kansas City. Sophia Wilson's been very good. Manaka Matsukubo, as we know. Ashley Sanchez. Oh, and shout out to Dudinha, who suffered an ACL tear against the U.S. for those 2 Brazil games. She was putting together just such an incredible season for San Diego. That one is just, it breaks your heart because that was an MVP finalist in my opinion. But beyond kind of that list that we've been talking about, another evergreen question arises about some of even the potential, limitations of the MVP title, right? We're talking about a lot of attackers, and the NWSL isn't the first or last league in the world to have MVP become sort of a most valuable attacking player award. As we know with the NWSL, there are delineated positional awards for every single other line on the field, except for attacker. There's Golden Boot, obviously, but as we know, that isn't always the same as someone that we think of as MVP. But if, for example, let's like focus on Gotham for a second, right? Let's say Gotham goes, supernova. They do what we think they can do. Maybe Sam Kerr even gets a look. This would not be the only time that a player becomes a finalist on this sort of limited portfolio. But if Ann-Katrin Berger breaks the NWSL shutout record, does she get a shout for MVP finalists, or is that just sort of siloed into, goalkeeper of the year? Like I said, we were right, and if she stays crushing it at outside back, being as much sort of in the attack as she is in the defense, does she get a look beyond defender of the year? Jordan Dudley, like I said, rookie of the year front runner. Can she get an MVP look while sitting as front runner for rookie of the year? It's a lot of Gotham. I'm feeling good about Gotham this week, having seen the Challenge Cup. But I do think it's interesting to wonder if we're going to see more diversity again with this sort of parity-rich season that we've had, or if it's just going to kind of stick to this, these are the best attacking players. There's no other perfect way to honor those players. That becomes your MVP list. And I think positional, as we said, player positions and NWSL awards in general, common point of conversation, especially because players move around, shoehorning common in a long season. But there is this window opening in July, and I just think that's really interesting with both Chawinga and Banda, who have been the two best players in the NWSL for multiple years over. Will any other players make up ground? It's just going to be a matter of who steps up. And then my last little one, we're going a little long here, but big stuff. NWSL's coming back. This is just a little one, and it is sort of a continuation of a conversation we were having last week, which is this question of, can Angel City turn it around? And I think this applies to a couple of these other teams that you want to be better than they are. You want to see results, whether it's Bay FC or Seattle or any of these other teams that are below the playoff line right now. Is Angel City doomed to repeat history over and over and over again forever, or do the changes made over the break have a chance to save them? I think is, it's like the bajillion-dollar question, right? But once again, go into the second half of a season with an interim coach. Not the first time this has happened for them. They've got some roster tweaking that we saw, a hope that maybe this time the club will be able to build something sustainable, but it is hard to rebuild the plane midair as they are, now trying to get, string results together while also doing some of this back end work. Can they turn it around? I genuinely don't know. I would like to think so. I have like one negative to this and one positive to this, which is that Kennedy Fuller, as we talked about, who they sent up to Bay FC, was like their highest performing player in the first near half of the season. That is a huge piece to move out of your roster while trying to get better and improve your results. But I also think Ali Sentner will make a positive impact as a new signing. But the positive for Angel City, and this is like the glimmer of hope, is I don't think, and I think this is why you remove Strauss probably, they have not optimized the potential of the roster they do currently have, which is less than it has been in the past. It's why you fire a coach. Should give you some hope that they don't need a ton of additional roster moves right now to raise their floor. Because I'd worry more about that floor than the ceiling. I think that's the thing for Angel City all the time, is that they can be the most exciting team in the league on their day. But you get into the playoffs, you make that momentum, you do that push by raising your floor. What does your worst day look like? How organized are you when things are just not hitting at the other end? Scrap for results as much as possible. Build a foundation. And like I said, that could be said about a lot of teams near the bottom of the table. And as always, I want to see the NWSL be a high floor team. I think that is their calling card. I want that to not just be a slogan. I want it to be true. And so we're going to be keeping an eye on some of those teams as well, because I would love to see some of these other teams, not just Denver that's below the playoff line, be able to make a little bit of a run. So like I said, non-exhaustive, but certainly felt like we dove into some interesting stuff. Can't wait for games to resume. And I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be topsy-turvy. I kind of like these. I don't love losing the NWSL for a month, but I don't think the season reset is also necessarily bad. I think we're going to see some things shift, and that's really exciting too. So I cannot wait to watch.